Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales. This is a podcast where we explore how the best B2B sales leaders make the complex simple, drive relationships and revenue, and generally elevate the sales profession. In this podcast, we're bringing together sales experts, thought leaders, top account executives, buyers, industry insiders, all to share their experiences and best practices for navigating the complex sales cycle. So whether you're a seasoned sales professional, a sales leader, or just starting out, you're going to find practical insights and actionable advice that you can apply to your own sales journey. Plus, we have a bit of fun. Today, we're welcoming Pete Evans of Immerse. Pete is a business growth specialist, a sales effectiveness expert, and a high-performance sales coach. He is specializing in helping companies drive clear revenue strategies, a sales-ready mindset, and looking at the sales function for companies now and in the future. We're excited to have Pete on the show. Let's get started with the art and science of complex sales. Hey, Pete, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, Paul. So thanks for inviting us to participate in your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love having you. We just for full transparency, Pete and I have known each other for a while, and we're partners in business and able to, we work with Membrane and Immerse Group. So it's long overdue, my man.
Yeah, it is. Very much looking forward to the discussion and the questions you're going to ask this afternoon.
So the first question, and people that are listeners to the show get this one. They know that I have to ask it. So we need to set a baseline. This is about the art and science of sales and complex sales. So, Pete, what is sales to you? How do you define it?
I think that's a fantastic question. And I think sales means lots of things to lots of different people. But I think for me, at its very basic level, sales is about having a high quality conversation with somebody. It's about the ability to ask great questions and sufficient questions. And I think it's also about listening. So I think the more questions you ask of a prospect or an existing client, the more you can really dig deep with that prospect and, have a discussion about their challenges and their problems. I was with a client yesterday facilitating a workshop, and we're discussing the client's not really interested in your product. What they're interested in is, can you help them solve a problem? Because everything that we buy it provides us with a solution. If you think about it, if we go to this very basic level, if we go into a supermarket to buy food, actually we're buying food to give us energy, to keep alive. That's our problem as humans. How do you have sufficient energy to get through the day? And then if you extrapolate that into complex sales, your customers and prospects have challenges, and sometimes your customers and prospects don't even know what those challenges are. So a great salesperson will feel comfortable having a conversation with somebody. Mm-hmm. They'll feel comfortable asking questions, and they'll also feel really comfortable digging deep into that conversation. And a friend of mine said it's a bit like when you've got a garden and there's lots of weeds in the garden. You can superficially dig into the garden and you think you've actually got rid of all the weeds. And then a week later, you find your garden's full of weeds again. And he said, it's because you haven't dug deep enough to really get to the root of the weeds. He said, you've just taken up a top layer of the weeds. And he said, that's what sales is about. You really got to dig deep into the conversation.
So if we're defining it by conversation, right? So the art of the conversation that is getting to a problem, then how are we helping others have conversations? Like what are the things that you're finding in market that is really helping the people drive conversations?
Again, that's another great question. I think what's helping drive conversations, and I've heard this. I've actually heard this many times. From different sales experts. Both in the UK and globally. I'll break this down into three component parts. One is preparation. I think if you're going to have a meeting with somebody, and I apply this principle both to your prospects and existing clients. You've got to do your research. So as an example of that, I might have arranged a meeting with you, Paul, you might be the buyer, the ultimate user of my product or service, but there will be other people involved in the buying decision in your organization. So being able to go to the meeting and map that out for you as well, I think is really important. I think also in terms of research, these days, because of the internet, you can find out so much information about your prospect. You can find out things like the turnover, the structure of the business. There'll be lots of information, news articles, press releases, etc. So I think be well researched, because I think when you show up to a meeting as a salesperson and you can demonstrate you've already done some homework on the prospect, I think that elevates you as a trusted advisor. So I think that's one aspect to it. I think that the second aspect, which we're really keen on as a business, is actually getting salespeople to practice. I know the salespeople, I can see you smiling there, don't like role plays because they say it's not a real life environment. But how many businesses out there are paying their salespeople to practice on both on their prospects and their existing clients? We were talking before, and I'm a big sports fan, big fan of a sport in the UK called rugby league, but also follow rugby union. But sports teams practice their moves before they enter on the pitch. I know sometimes when you're watching your favourite team, you may think they haven't practiced during the week, but they do practice their moves so they get better at it. And I think practice and role play is essential to having high quality conversations. Even if you break it down into the practice of the component parts of the meeting, you can improve. So for example, you could take the opening of the meeting, how do I make sure that if I'm meeting with Paul, I really engage with him properly? How do I build that rapport and trust really quickly? So I think practicing these elements, if you practice something, you get better at it. And I'm going to relate it to something that I've been doing as well outside of work. So I'm training to run a marathon. I've never run a marathon before. I've got a personal trainer, and the personal trainer said to me in the first session, we're actually going to practice the basics of the exercise you've got to do, and not until you've mastered the basics are we going to move on to something else. And he said it's going to be repetitive. He said, but it's going to be foundational. And I said, why? He said, because people come into this gym and I see them doing and he says they're very macho, and they go and they try and lift 100 pounds and they can't because they get the technique wrong. He said, in anything you do in life, if you can do the basics well, you can build on the foundations. He says, but in sport, you've got to keep practicing the basics. And I think that's the same in sales. To have a great conversation, you've got to practice those basics well. And
I actually had a conversation some months back where Dave Curlin made an awesome point. He said, practice makes permanent, right? So we talk about practice makes perfect. Well, if you're practicing wrong, right? If you're practicing wrong, it doesn't make perfect. It makes you permanently imperfect. But that makes a lot of sense when you're talking about the foundations and the basics. I don't want to interrupt there because you had 3 P's, I think, or three things. So preparation, practice, and
practice. And actually, I think writing down questions that you want to ask. So what I do is I have a pad and I map out some questions I want to ask. And it's not about having a script, but it's having some pointers. And I think even, obviously we do a lot of our discovery meetings, using Teams, using Zoom. But what I would do if I was doing a meeting face to face, I've done some preparation, I've got some notes. So have a list of questions that you want to ask. And I think that's really key. But also, this comes back to the first 2 points about preparation and practice. When you practice and the prospect says, for example, well, Pete, last year our sales declined by 15%. It's then knowing what follow-up questions to ask. So I might say to you, if you said that to me, so what impact has that had on your business, Paul? Mm-hmm. What step or what things you've had to do in the business. Because if your revenue declined by 15%, what impact does that have on your net profit as a business? What can't you do? So it's understanding when you ask one question, dig a bit deeper as well. So I think those are 3 things that you can do to have a great conversation. There is a 4th one. Here's a bonus one, Paul.
Yeah.
You've really got to listen, and I think you've got to listen with intent. So what we notice in Merce working with clients is lots of salespeople will ask a question, and the prospect will be sharing some nuggets, but the salesperson is listening to respond rather than truly listening. So you might, for example, if I was talking to you about sales transformation, and I was saying, Paul, tell me about membranes growth. Where are your challenges of head of sales? And you might start by saying, well, we've got some great people. They're not as effective as they could be. And I might be thinking, oh, so they're not as effective as they could be. Right, Paul, can I sell you a coaching program? No, I'm sure membranes don't need a coaching program. But you might then go on to say, and do you know what, Pete? We've got lots of deals in our pipeline that don't seem to close, or we're not making the same margins. And if I'm really listening to you, I can say, hey, Paul, so can I just play back to you what you've just said? Are these 3 things that are having an impact on your ability to grow revenue? Could we unpack those a bit more? Would that be beneficial to unpack them a bit more? Or, Paul, I'm really keen to understand a bit more about these challenges. So it's really listening, and I think summarizing and checking as well, it is a great skill in sales and listening to people.
Let's see if I can summarize and check on this, because we've gone around the horn a bit. But what I heard you say is 3. We talked about conversations and how to have a great conversation. So you gave 3 tips around those: preparation, practice, and pointers, right? So, and preparation is being able to be knowledgeable enough to build trust with the client. Practice is really being able to build trust with yourself that you can go in and do this stuff. And then pointers is kind of map the way. And then you talked about wrapping that up with listening with intent. So if you do the 3 Ps, then you're able to truly listen with intent. Did I get it?
Yeah. And I think showing genuine interest in the other person, that doesn't mean that you have to like them, but I think it's things like being able to have eye contact with people. I think when you're on screen, not being distracted. I'm sure, Paul, you've been on plenty of Zoom meetings where, you've suddenly seen the other person pick up their phone and they're tapping away on the screen, and you're thinking they're not giving they're not giving you full attention.
What are you talking about, Pete?
I don't know.
Sorry for that. This is audio. I forgot. Yeah, no, I'm sitting here texting. I completely missed you.
But I think that that these sorts of things happen, and I've observed them. And I think you've got to completely focus on the other person. If you're, we're talking about the art and science of complex sales here. We're talking about complex deals, and as a salesperson, you're wanting to create a situation where your prospect is going to buy off your company rather than the competitor. And you've got to truly listen. You could be talking about deals of $50,000, $100,000 plus. And if you're not paying attention, you're giving signals out about your organization and how they deal with things. And so I think you've got to, that conversation is not just about your questions. It's about your body language, the way you're interacting with people. And I think that's so important because people pick up on the signs as well.
One of the things that I'm overall from our conversations, we're not talking about anything that's like groundbreaking or next level, or we are talking about fundamentals and foundations. And so in your experience with salespeople and with coaching, tell me a little bit about how we work with people on the mindset to make sure that we're focusing on those fundamentals and foundations and to do it well. Because that seems to be a differentiator.
I think it's very much a differentiator, and it's interesting you're saying this isn't necessarily anything new or revolutionary.
Yeah, and that was not meant to be a knock. I think it's fantastic. I think the foundational is the truth, right? Is how do we get to the truth of the matter? So
yeah, and I think I'm just going to talk about my experience of studying successful sports people, athletes, etc. And they all talk about getting the foundations right and getting the basics right. It's so important. I think there's an interesting conversation around talent and their mindset. And I've come across a lot of people who've got the talent. They've probably got what I call the gift of the gab. They've got all the patter. But when it comes to actually applying themselves and their skill, they lack the mindset to do it because they're trying to sell on, their winning personality. I remember quite a few years ago doing a Salesforce evaluation of a company, and the top producer was bringing in $20 million of revenue per annum, and his OMG valuation wasn't particularly good. And he said, "Well, what you've got to understand, Pete, the two clients I work with love me, and I've got a winning personality." And what was interesting was that all of the salespeople in this organization were copying his behavior, but it wasn't scalable and it wasn't repeatable, because actually what this individual was doing, he wasn't doing the basics well. So he was cutting corners. And I think it's the same in sales. Lots of people know what to do, but they lack the mindset and the discipline to apply it as well. And I think just a bit of a plug for Membrane here is that what tools like Membrane do, it's not just a collection of data, but it's got the process in place to make sure that you follow that process consistently, but you can also be coached around the things that you might not be strong at in the sales process. And I think this is really important for salespeople and sales leaders and sales managers to understand that you've got to coach people around the process. Because if you miss steps out in the process, you're decreasing your chances of winning. And that is so important.
Yeah, I learned an important lesson. It was early in my career. I had it was one of my favorite success stories that I've ever been a part of. And this gentleman is a really good friend of mine. I hired him very early in his career, and he was not good as a salesperson. He didn't have any of what people would necessarily say are the natural talent abilities of a salesperson. He bought a book and read it. It's called "Talent is Overrated" by a guy named Jeff Colvin, and he gave me a copy of the book. He bought the book, and it was one of those things that if I truly looked at this, and it was like, talent is needed. You need to have some base talent, but the critical thing is that mindset, to be able to flip that mindset and that discipline to be able to learn and work, and then to be able to follow processes to do it really, really well. And essentially that's, Jeff's, I'm summarizing, but his thesis of the book is that, you don't necessarily, it's not always the most talented people that are the most successful. It's the people that get the coaching that's needed, have the process that's needed, and have the discipline and drive to continue and persevere rather than, and this gentleman now is like, I told him when I hired him, like, I'd like to work for you someday, is what I said. And he's well on that way to be able to making that a reality. And so that's what I'm hearing you say is it's like, how do we, and so that mindset is so critical, and that mindset of a salesperson is so critical. How do you focus on that with a team member? What are you finding that's really helping people drive a mindset of perseverance and success and discipline and focus on that?
Well, I'm going to relate this to some of the findings we see using objective management group evaluations with sales teams. So I think one of the things we noticed in Salesforce evaluations is lots of salespeople don't have written down personal goals. I think that, and I've seen this with professional sports people, that where people have written down personal goals, when the going gets a bit tough, you've got something to relate to. And I think this is a starting point. And I think what's interesting is that when you've used some words that are like discipline and commitment. And we had when I was running the UK operations sales star, Jamie Peacock, who was a Great Britain international, rugby league international, he said that it's very easy to get out of bed in the morning and go training when you feel great and the sun is shining. He said, but when your body's aching and you open the curtains and you look out the window and it's hailstoning and it's a 20-mile-an-hour wind, it's really difficult to drag yourself out of bed. And he said, this isn't just to do with sport. This is to do with things that you want to achieve in life. And he said, the things that keep you motivated are your personal goals. And he said, you learn more about yourself when you do drag yourself out of bed, when you don't feel like doing it. And there are so many correlations between success in sports, success in business, and success in sales. There are some days, I think, when we all feel, listen, this is about our humility as sales leaders, is that we probably don't feel like picking up the phone. We might have an argument with a member of family. We're looking at our prospect list, or we're looking at our discovery meeting and thinking, that poor fella, he's difficult to deal with. And I don't feel like it because I've had an argument with a partner or whatever. But I think to keep your motivation going, you've got to focus on your goals. And I think the managers and leaders have got to understand their people better and what their drivers are. I'm going to share an example. This is a salesperson, a client that I'm working with. The salesperson has had some real challenges. He can sell. He's got a technical background. He's really pushed back in the last few months, about changing his behaviours and doing things differently. Mm-hmm. And in a coaching session, I said, we talked about changing mindset, and I said, he said, I don't really read. I don't listen to Audible. Listen, I think I'm going to get the, and actually his objective is that he wants to focus on earning a £20,000 bonus in the next 12 months. That would mean a lot to him, what that bonus could do for him personally, take his family on holiday, etc. So we really focused on that. So I said, if you carry on doing the things you've always done, what are the chances of you earning that £20,000 bonus? And I said, I don't want you to answer it today in the coaches. I want you to come back in the next session and think about it. And he, do you go walking? And he said, yeah, I walk every morning. I said, you walk for 30 minutes. He said, because he said he didn't have time to listen to an audiobook. So I said, how about if you did it when you went for a walk? He said, I can do two things at once then. So I actually talked about Carol Dweck and her work on growth mindset. So we bought Carol Dweck's book on mindset. He had to go for a hospital appointment yesterday, and he rang me and said, when I was in hospital waiting, I've finished the book. And he said, I now understand this whole terminology about growth mindset. I'm blocking out my time. I've booked in role plays with the rest of the team to practice. And he said, I've worked it out for myself. I've had limiting beliefs for years. And he said, now I've got the right mindset, I can start applying some of these things. So I think that's a great example of getting somebody to focus on the goals and understanding you have good and bad days. But actually, if you've got the right mindset, you can work your way through those difficult days as a salesperson.
And for those of us that don't speak British, it's Carol Dweck, right? With a DWECK mindset, The New Psychology of Success, right? That's the book. Yeah, it's a great one, and it's a lesson I've learned again and again and again, and I've been taught it in a variety of ways, right, through life. But our mindset is the one thing that we can control, that's the greatest gift to be able to control, right? That we don't have to give in to the emotion of the moment, and we can control that mindset and push through. And so good for you, man, on helping people understand that and coach that, especially in the sales arena, because we get pounded. We get pounded at this point because people are thinking, I think there's been an overabundance of over prospecting, right? There's been an overabundance of of not focusing on the core skills and the fundamentals that get us there. And so it leads a majority of buyers that have had a negative experience.
I would agree. And I think there's something deeper in terms of the actual, mindset that you have, and it comes back to this principle of discipline and commitment. I think there are lots of highs in sales. There are lots of much when you win a deal and something lands or you get that order. I don't think there's any other role that you have in an organization that gives you that sort of high. I think it's akin to scoring a try in rugby or a goal in football or soccer, or hitting the home run in baseball. But there's a lot of work that goes into each of those activities in scoring a try, scoring a goal, scoring a home run. And it's the same in sales. There's a lot of grunt work to get that deal over the line. Mm-hmm. And you've got to be prepared for those highs and lows. And I think that's sometimes, what we're missing today is that saying to salespeople, you've got to consistently apply for yourself. There is no magic source to success. There's no magic wand we can wave. If you're in new business, you're going to have to consistently prospect. And there are going to be days when you don't feel like prospecting. There'll be days when you don't feel like practicing. But actually, if you do it and you do it well and you get feedback, that will help you improve. So I think that's what we've got to really, leaders and managers have got to focus on, and organizations have got to focus on, is using the data and using the tools like Membrane to help with great coaching, be more consistent about it as well.
I had a conversation with a gentleman named Scott Leese. Great guy. He's written a couple of books on sales management and leadership and that type of stuff. But he resonates directly with you in terms of the, understanding the individual goals of that person, being able to walk alongside them in those individual goals. And then one of the things I think we do this in sales often, especially, and I've noticed it a lot in the VC culture, and that's not a slam on the VC culture. It's just that's where I've noticed it, is to focus only on the end result, and instead of the focus on a lot of the steps that gets you to that consistently build to that end result, right? Yeah. We do it with a focus. Process is incredibly important to have a great end result, and repeating that process, and repeated training, repeated coaching, repeated, focus on the mindset. And as a great conversation with Mornay on just, mental health, right? Being able to focus on that. But, it's not all the responsibility of the company to do, and the responsibility of the leadership. There's a lot of that falls on the salesperson themselves, but being able to enable those conversations, I think, is what yourself and other great coaches are doing, is being able to enable those conversations to show people the difference in mindset that drives to that end result. Because we're always judged on that. You're always judged on that end result in sales. Same thing in sports. You're always judged on, did you try? Did you win the game? But that's not a majority of the work.
No, it's not. I think this is interesting because, I'm training for this marathon, and it's in Leeds. There's lots of hills. I've got a training plan which I'm following, and most weeks I'm able to do the long run with some of my running friends. The trend's been going fairly well, touch wood. And the other week I had to do a long run on my own. It didn't go according to plan. I think after about 3 kilometers, I was already broken, and I was supposed to be running about 25 kilometers. I just sort of kept plugging away, I'd run and then walk for a bit. And I think I got up to about 21 kilometers and had to ring my partner and say, hey, you need to come and pick me up. I'm broken. And I unpacked that with my running friends, and they said, well, it's much better to have a bad run when you're training than on the day of the marathon, because you've locked that thought in your mind out and you've learned how to deal with that experience. And I think it's the same in sales. I think too much we beat people up when something goes wrong. But I think if something doesn't go according to plan in sales, that's where you bank the learning and you say, okay, how can we unpack that? My presentation to Paul, it went really badly. I wasn't in the zone when I logged into the call. I didn't prepare well, but what can I bank from that? Was I tired? Did I have low energy? What did I do with the day? And I think we've got to really get people to learn from, I don't say the mistakes, but things that don't go well in sales. Mm-hmm. And we've got to unpack the coaching moments. And I remember, when I first started in sales with a financial services company, the regional sales director was a guy called Jamie McIver, said to me after he hired me, he said, if you don't make mistakes, you're not doing your job well enough. And I asked him why he said that. He said, because you're not trying hard enough if you don't make mistakes. He said, I'm not saying you should do, because we're in financial services, do stuff that's not compliant. But if you don't make a mistake in the sales process, then you're not going to learn. He said, I'm not going to tell you to intentionally make mistakes, but actually you'll learn by the things that you don't win and the deals you don't get. Because he said you won't have asked enough questions, you won't have identified the pain points, you won't have understood the decision-making process. And he said, when that happens to you, you'll learn, and you'll learn lots about yourself, and then you can bank that learning.
My daughter, she's 10, and she's like, Dad, I learned this great. You know what fail means? I'm like, I think so. Yeah, I know what fail means, but what do you think it means, honey? She goes, forward, always in learning. I'm like, ooh, I like that. That's awesome. Forward, always in learning. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So as one of her teachers dropped that on her, but and one of the things I was talking to a buddy the other day, and he had and just back to the sports relation, right? And I think we do this a lot in sales, and I've done it myself. Whereas I had a buddy who's, his kid went in cold, got put in it was a baseball game, went in cold. They're one run up in the 9th inning, and the kid makes an error, right? And the coach goes after him. Like the coach went after him like we lost the game because it was your fault, yada, 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 yada. And sometimes we do that in sales, and that's not that the kid is never going to want to go in there again and try and give and learn from that. It's essentially you put all that weight of the game on him when it's coach had a factor in decision, putting him in cold, the pitch that got thrown.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, hey, we'll get him next time. That was an us thing. We'll get him next time. And I think more and more as you get to the fundamentals and the fundamentals of coaching people, I think we do that in sales, like getting the mindset right, focusing on your goals. How do we do this together? How do we we got to minimize mistakes, but we can make them.
Yeah.
Right. And
I think, like you say, it's not beating somebody up over the head because they've made a mistake, because actually sales is not an individual sport. It's a team effort. Mm-hmm. There'll be somebody at the front leading it, but they'll need, particularly in complex sales, they will need the support of technical people, customer service, customer engagement, whatever titles organizations give. But you've got to recognize that I always used to say, we win together and we lose together. And I think that's so important. I think you can analyze it afterwards, and if you don't win the deal, and say, actually, what can we do differently? What can we all learn? And I know that in team sports, they do a lot of analysis when they don't win. And I think what's interesting in team sports, having sports professional sports people, particularly in rugby, if they play on a Friday night or a Saturday afternoon, Monday morning, the first thing that the team will do is give each other feedback. And that feedback, because it's sport, can actually be quite brutal. And I'm not saying that we should go to that depth of brutality in our feedback with salespeople, but I do think that if we were more candid with each other, we'd probably accelerate our performance more as well. If we honestly felt that somebody in the team had let us down because actually their mindset wasn't correct, or they hadn't prepared properly, that would probably accelerate performance. So I think, circling back to something you asked earlier on about mindset, I think it's the role of the leader to facilitate that discussion as well. Mm-hmm. And say, actually, did we not prepare as well? Actually, did we not practice as well? I can remember probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and this was actually post-sale, when we were briefing the whole of the sales team going into objective management group. And it was a Friday afternoon, and we had like the standard slide deck, for the presentation, and it did not land well with the client. And I remember the member of my team who was with me at the time on the call afterwards saying, "Hey, Pete, I know it's Friday afternoon, it's 5 p.m., but we really need to unpack this." And the feedback I said, "Pete, that's one of the worst performances ever." Right. I think it landed with me to think, actually, I need to up my game here. Now, I'm the sort of person who will take that feedback on board and say, actually, I'm going to learn from that.
Yeah.
And actually, the lesson is, I lose on the words that actually I've made an assumption. The client's already agreed the contract. This is in the setup phase. But actually, I should have gone in with a mentality of loving that client as much as I did in the courting phase of the relationship. Just because you've got the contract, you could still lose it.
Yeah.
It's being receptive to feedback as well. You've got to be receptive. And when I'm coaching, I always try and frame it and say, hey, Paul, I really want to discuss this. And is it okay if I give you some feedback on what I've observed? Because I want the feedback to be constructive, but this is my perception of what I've seen or I've heard. And you can use things like, so if you were giving yourself some advice, what advice would you give yourself, having heard, how you delivered that message to your prospects or how that meeting went?
I like that question.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And we could go on for a long time. I think we're going to end on that. I think that's a great ending spot for us. Yeah. One of the things I want to make sure that I ask you before our time is done is how people get a hold of you. If people want to talk to Pete and have Pete ask them questions such as, what advice would you give yourself? That's a fantastic coaching question. How do they get a hold of you?
Probably the best way is to contact me through LinkedIn. If you type in Pete Evans, you'll find me there, or you can contact me by the Immerse website, which is immersesales.com. And I'd be more than happy to connect or happy to speak to people.
That's EMERSE, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. EMERSE sales.com.
That's right, yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom on sales with the world. I think it's going to be an awesome episode for everybody to listen to. And everybody, with that, we're going to go ahead. Pete, any final words you want to say?
Well, some final words. I think it comes down to being pragmatic, but being positive. And somebody once said to me, why would you buy a grumpy, miserable salesperson? So smile.
I love it. With that, everybody, we're signing off on the Art and Science of Complex Sales. Have an amazing day and go out there and shine bright. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Art and Science of Complex Sales. This podcast is sponsored by Membrane and our partners from around the globe. Here at Membrane, we believe that B2B sales is at a crossroads. Due to decades of quantity-based prospecting, information overload, and really a shift towards efficiency over service and pitching over leadership in sales, customers are saying enough is enough. They're tuning out average performers and choosing to take most of the buying journey on their own. This results in up and down sales results, forecasts that are all over the place, and salespeople that are half committed due to the fact that they're having poor results and they have an inability to truly connect with customers. We believe the road successful companies are taking to combat this is threefold. Number one, training to create leaders and executives across all areas of the team with strong habits and sales methodologies that bring value. Number two, technology. Technology that focuses and helps a salesperson succeed and reinforces great habits, rather than wasting their time on filling out fields for reporting or wasting their time on spamming customers that have no interest in ever buying. Third, talent. And I'm talking about talent that's empowered and emboldened to make a difference for their customers and their companies. So where are you on that journey? Membrane and our network of partners across the globe are here to help and to elevate the sales profession. We streamline critical technology by combining CRM, training and enablement, and more into one seamless platform. We drive best-in-class methodologies through our partners. They provide the top thought leadership methodologies and resources from across the globe. And our collective efforts are dedicated to recruiting, training, coaching, and empowering, and measuring the habits of the top teams in the world to ensure success. Join us at membrane.com to learn more. And thank you so much for listening.